The forest was always quietest just before the moon rose. Junsu knew this. It was his favorite time to sit on the creaking steps of his cabin, with Bada, his dog, a solid, warm weight leaning against his leg. The air in the Gangwon Valley was sharp with the scent of pine and cold earth. He sipped his barley tea and watched the last of the day's light fade from the sky. Bada was a mix of many things, some Jindo, maybe some village dog with a thick brown coat and intelligent eyes. He was not a nervous animal. But tonight, his head lifted suddenly. His ears swiveled forward, and a low, uncertain whine vibrated in his throat. Junsu put a hand on the dog's back. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. There was no answer, only the usual night sounds, the whisper of the wind, the distant call of an owl. But Bada's tension did not ease out then. The world changed. There was no loud explosion. Instead, a deep, shuddering thump rolled through the mountains, like a giant book being dropped on a distant carpet. The air itself seemed to press in for a second. A few seconds later, a wave of warmer air washed over them, carrying a strange, metallic smell. Birds erupted from the trees in a panic of wings. Junsu was on his feet, his military instincts, long buried under years of quiet woodworking, snapping awake. This was not a plane, not a meteor, he thought. It was too controlled, too close. Bada let out a sharp bark, looking towards the west, deeper into the valley where no roads went. Junsu did not hesitate. He grabbed his heavy coat, a powerful flashlight, and a stout walking stick from beside the door. "Let's go," he said to Bada, and the dog was already ahead, nose to the ground, tail stiff. The hike was rough, over familiar but treacherous paths made darker by the night. Bada moved with purpose, a shadow ahead of him. The strange smell grew stronger, a mix of ozone, like after a lightning strike, and something else, something organic and sweet, like crushed leaves and foreign spice. After 30 minutes of hard walking, Junsu saw an orange glow flickering through the trees. It was not the steady light of a fire, but a pulsating, sickly light. He entered a small clearing he knew well. It was not the same now. In the center, a vessel had carved a deep, black scar into the earth. It was not made of metal, as he had expected. It looked more like a giant, burned seed pod or a piece of dark, petrified wood about the size of his truck. Sections of it were split open, weeping a sap-like fluid that glowed with that same faint orange light. The air hummed with a fading energy. Bada did not run forward. He stopped at the tree line, his body low, another whine escaping him. But it was not a sound of fear. It was a sound of deep concern. Junsu approached slowly, his flashlight beam cutting through the steam rising from the ground. He called out, "Hello? Is anyone hurt?" He spoke in Korean, then again in the bits of English he remembered. Only the crackle of cooling wreckage answered Dot then. He saw movement inside the largest crack in the pod. His light found them. 2 small figures were huddled together in a cavity lined with soft, fibrous material. They were perhaps the size of a young child, but their proportions were slightly different: longer fingers, larger heads. Their skin was a smooth, pearlescent silver, like the inside of a seashell, and it seemed to subtly reflect the faint glow of their dying ship. They were wrapped in simple, dark cloth, but it was their faces that stopped Junsu's breath. They had large, wide-set eyes, dark as polished obsidian, with no visible white. And those eyes were streaming with thick, silver tears that traced shimmering paths down their cheeks. They trembled violently, arms wrapped around each other. The emotion coming from them was not a sound, but a feeling that pressed directly against Junsu's mind. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated terror, and beneath it, a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical weight in the air. Junsu froze. Every instinct told him this was impossible, dangerous. He should run, call someone, something. But he looked at Bada. The dog had inched forward, his nose twitching. Then slowly, Bada lay down on his belly, a few feet from the pod, and let out a soft, pleading whimper. It was the sound he made when he found an injured bird. That decided it. Junsu slowly knelt in the damp soil, placing his walking stick and flashlight on the ground beside him, hands open and visible. He did not know if they could understand. "It's okay," he murmured, the same tone he used for frightened animals. "You're safe now. No one will hurt you here." One of the twins, he could not tell them apart, yet flinched at the sound of his voice. But the other, perhaps slightly taller, slowly untucked its head. Its large, dark eyes locked onto Junsu's. The mental pressure intensified, not as an attack, but as a desperate, clumsy attempt to communicate. Images and concepts slammed into Junsu's thoughts. A vast, cold starship. A presence that was many, yet one, feeling like ice. A crushing sense of failure. And then the emptiness of exile. The words formed in his mind, clear and cold and soaked in grief. They were not in Korean, but he understood them perfectly. "We were bad." A fresh wave of silver tears. The twins' small hand reached out, not towards Junsu, but towards Bada. The dog, still on his belly, gave a slow, gentle wag of his tail. The twins' mind voice was a shattered whisper. Mom left us. The meaning was clear. Their mother, their creator, their guiding intelligence, had cast them out. For being bad. They were children, abandoned in the wilderness. Junsu looked from their tear-streaked faces to the smoldering wreck of their pod, to the vast, uncaring stars above the clearing. His own past, his own reasons for leaving the noise of people behind, echoed in a quiet corner of his heart. He was familiar with loneliness. He did not stand up. He stayed on his knees. He pointed slowly, carefully, back in the direction of his cabin. "My home is warm," he said aloud, shaping the thoughts slowly in his mind as well. Warm, safe. He then gestured to the blanket he often carried in his pack for emergencies, a thick woolen thing. He mimed wrapping it around himself. Warm. He looked at the twins, then at Bada. "This is Bada. He is good. He will not hurt you." To demonstrate, he clicked his tongue. "Bada, come." Bada stood and walked to Junsu's side, sitting down, his body still relaxed. He sniffed the air towards the twins, his tail giving another tentative sweep across the pine needles. Junsu waited. The night was cold. The pod's light was fading. The twins looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them in a way he could not hear. Finally, the one who had spoken stood up, unsteady on its feet. It took a step, then another, out of the wreckage and onto the soil of earth. Its sibling followed. Clutching its hand, they stood there. Two lost silver children in a dark Korean forest, looking at a man and his dog. They took a step forward, then another. They were coming. Junsu let out a breath. He didn't know he was holding. He did not try to pick them up or touch them. He simply stood, gathered his things, and with Bada walking calmly between him and the twins, he began the slow walk back to the cabin, leaving the broken pod to the night. He offered no grand promises, no explanations. In that moment, he offered only the simplest things he had, a warm place to sit and the quiet, steady presence of a friend. It was enough. The cabin had never felt so small, nor so full. Junsu moved quietly, aware that every small sound seemed to make the two silver figures flinch. They stood just inside the door, huddled together, their large eyes taking in the single room, the wood-burning stove, the low table, the bed in the corner, the tools and half-finished carvings on his workbench. Their gaze held no understanding of the objects, only a deep wariness. Junsu knew he had to be simple. He pointed to himself. Junsu. He said it slowly. Then he pointed to the dog, who was sitting patiently, watching everyone. Bada, the twin who had spoken in the clearing, looked at him. A concept, not a name, brushed Junsu's mind. It was a feeling of the first one, the one who speaks. The other twin's presence felt like the second one, the one who feels deeply. For now, Junsu decided to think of them as Subin and Hana, simple names that felt gentle. The first speaker would be Subin. The quiet, trembling one would be Hana. "Okay," Junsu said softly. "First, warm." He went to the stove and added 2 more logs, opening the vent to let the flames rise. The orange light filled the room, warmer and kinder than the dying glow of their pod. He then pulled 2 thick woolen blankets from a chest. He held one out, showing it, and slowly laid it on the wooden floor near the growing heat of the stove. He laid the second one beside it. He pointed to the blankets, then to them. Then he moved to his small kitchen area. He filled a pot with water from his jug and set it on the stove's flat top to heat. From a cupboard, he took out a packet of instant mayok guk, seaweed soup. It was simple, salty, and nourishing. He did not know if they could eat it, but warm water and nutrients seemed like a universal idea. While the water heated, he sat down on the floor himself, leaning against his bed frame, making himself smaller, less threatening. Bada, sensing the plan, walked over to the blankets, circled twice, and lay down on the edge of one with a heavy sigh, as if to say, "Asterisk, see? Safe." Asterisk slowly, so slowly, Subin guided Hana forward. They sank onto the blanket Bada had not taken, pulling the second one around their shoulders. The material seemed strange to them, but the warmth was undeniable. Their shivering began to lessen. The water boiled. Junsu prepared the soup in a single large bowl and brought 2 wooden spoons. He placed the bowl on the floor midway between him and them. He sat back again. Bada's tail thumped once. Subin looked at the steaming bowl, then at Junsu. A question formed in Junsu's mind. Asterisk purpose? Asterisk food, Junsu said aloud, miming bringing a spoon to his mouth. For strength. You try. Subin leaned forward and sniffed the air above the bowl. His slender fingers reached out and touched the bowl's rim, quickly pulling back from the heat. Then a new sensation touched Junsu's mind. It was a scanning feeling, a light probe at the molecular makeup of the soup. Subin looked at Hana and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Compatible. Simple. Subin picked up a spoon. He did not use it correctly at first, but after watching Junsu's mime again, he carefully scooped a small amount of the broth. He brought it to Hana's lips first. Hana sipped. A feeling, faint but unmistakable, bloomed in the room, a spark of comfort. It was the first positive emotion Junsu had felt from them. Hana then took the spoon and offered some to Subin. They shared the bowl quietly, their movements becoming more coordinated. With their immediate terror eased by warmth and food, their communication became clearer. It was not like hearing words. It was like suddenly knowing a story. Pictures formed in Junsu's head. A vast, beautiful, but cold place. Structures that were grown, not built. Beings of light and thought, moving in perfect, silent harmony. They were the collective. They were one. They were Mom. Subin and Hana were different. From their beginning, their thoughts were tangled together, private and strong. They shared a bond that excluded the whole. They had self and other, not just us. To the collective, this was a sickness, a dangerous error. They were taught, corrected, and finally judged. The concept of bad that they had sent was not about actions, but about their very existence. They were flawed. The final image was the coldest, standing before the vast, shimmering presence of the collective. There was no anger, only a calm, logical disappointment. They were a failed experiment. They were to be removed, taken to a listening outpost for study and eventual recycling. But the twins, in their shared fear, had acted. They had found a small scout pod, a simple thing, and had fled. The pursuit had been immediate. A blast from a pursuing ship had damaged their pod's guidance, sending them spiraling towards the first green. Blue world they saw. We were bad, Subin's thought voice repeated, now shaded with confusion and guilt. Asterisk, we broke the harmony. So Mom left us, threw us away. Asterisk, Junsu listened, his own heart feeling heavy. He looked at these two children, cast out for the crime of loving each other too much. He looked at Bada, who was now asleep, his head on his paws, guarding the twins by their feet. Junsu knew he had to answer, but not with big ideas, with small, true ones. He pointed to Bada. Bada is not like me. He is a dog. I am a human. We are different. Very different. He then pointed from himself to the twins. You are different from me. Very, very different. He made a circle with his fingers. Your mom. Wants everything the same? One picture. He then held up two separate hands. Here, different is okay. Bada and me, we are a pack. A small pack. We help each other. He wasn't sure they understood. But then Hana, who had been silent, reached out a thin silver hand. She did not touch Bada, but she let her hand hover just above the dog's fur. Bada, in his sleep, let out a contented huff of air. A feeling fragile as a spider's web came from Hana. It was not a word. It was the feeling of soft warmth and a question. Asterisk, this is allowed? Asterisk, yes, Junsu whispered. That is allowed. Just then, Bada's head popped up. His ears pricked forward, not towards the door, but towards the small, high window on the east wall. A low growl rumbled in his chest. A second later, Junsu heard it too, the distant, familiar crunch of tires on the old gravel forestry road that ended a kilometer away. Only one person ever came down that road, Yuna, the park ranger. She made her rounds every 2 weeks, always stopping to check on the hermit with the nice dog, bringing news, and sometimes a few vegetables from her mother's garden. She was kind, but she was also sharp and observant. Junsu's eyes went wide. The twins felt his spike of alarm and immediately froze, their fear returning in a cold wave. It's okay, Junsu said quickly, standing up. A friend. But she cannot see you. Not yet. He looked around his one-room cabin. There were few hiding places. His eyes landed on the large walk-in storage closet where he kept his timber, tools, and finished pieces. It was crowded, but it was dark and private. Come, he said, urging them up. He gathered their blankets and the empty soup bowl. In here. Quick. Quiet. Bada, stay with them. He herded the confused twins into the closet. He made a nest for them behind a stack of sanded oak planks. Stay quiet, Bada, guard. Bada slipped in after them, his body a barricade in front of their hiding spot. Juns. You shut the closet door just as a firm, friendly knock landed on his front door. He took a deep breath, smoothed his shirt, and tried to make his face look normal. He opened the door. Yuna stood there, her park ranger jacket dusty, a friendly smile on her face. Junsu, sorry to come so late. I was doing a final sweep and saw some weird atmospheric disturbance on the old sensors. Radio static, weird lights high up. No forecast for auroras. Just wanted to make sure everything was okay out here, in the middle of nowhere. Her eyes, however, were already moving past him. taking in the room, the 2 spoons on the floor, the extra blanket hastily tossed on the bed. You have guests? Junsu's mind raced. He stood in the doorway, blocking as much of the view as he could. Yuna's smile was friendly, but her eyes were the sharp, noticing eyes of a ranger. She had seen the 2 spoons. She had seen the extra blanket. No guests, Junsu said, his voice a little too even. He stepped aside to let her in, a normal gesture to seem normal. Just me and Bada. He was. Sharing my soup. Made a mess. He offered a small, awkward smile. Yuna stepped in, closing the door against the chill. Her gaze swept the room again, landing on the closet door. Bada's not saying hello, she noted. The dog always greeted her with a wag and a sniff. Sleeping, Junsu said quickly. Tired from our walk earlier. He moved to the stove. Can I make you tea? That'd be nice, Yuna said, but she didn't sit. She walked slowly around the room, her hands in her jacket pockets. She stopped at his workbench, touching the smooth curve of a half-finished maple bowl. The interference on the sensors was strange, Junsu, like a localized energy burst. Right in this valley. She turned to look at him. You didn't see anything? Hear anything? Junsu kept his back to her, focusing on pouring hot water into a cup. Just the wind. It was loud tonight. He felt a trickle of cold sweat down his spine. He could feel the twins' fear leaking from the closet, a low hum of terror that tightened the air in the cabin. He willed them, with all his might, to be still, to be quiet. Yuna said. She walked towards the bed and paused near the closet door. Bada, from inside, let out the softest, most nervous whine Junsu had ever heard. It was not a sound of sleep. Yuna's head tilted. He doesn't sound tired. He sounds stressed. Her hand lifted, almost without thought, towards the closet latch. Panic shot through Junsu. Yuna, don't. But it was too late. Her fingers touched the old wooden latch. Inside the closet, pressed behind the wood, Hannah was drowning in fear. The new human's presence was a storm of sharp curiosity and official concern. It was too much like the cold, probing minds of the collective. As the door began to open, as a sliver of light cut into the darkness, Hannah's control shattered. She didn't scream. She projected. A jumbled, raw blast of memory erupted from the closet. It wasn't aimed at Yuna. It was a psychic cry of pain. But Yuna was right in its path. The ranger gasped and stumbled back as if struck. The images and sensations flooded her mind, not as words, but as pure experience. The vast, silent, shimmering hall of the collective. The feeling of being utterly transparent, every private thought laid bare. The cold, impersonal judgment that was not hate, but something worse, the absolute certainty that you were wrong. A flaw to be corrected. And finally, the crushing loneliness of being cast out into the silent dark, clinging only to your twin. The profound, universe-sized sorrow of being abandoned by your mom. Yuna's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of Junsu's table, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror. The teacup Junsu was holding clattered onto the stovetop. He rushed over. Yuna! She stared past him, towards the closet door, which had swung fully open. In the darkness, 2 pairs of luminous, tear-filled eyes stared back, and between them, the worried face of Bada. Was that? Yuna breathed, her voice shaking. What are they? Junsu knew the lie was over. He helped her to a chair. They are lost, he said simply. He went to the closet door and knelt down. It's okay. Come out. It's okay now. Slowly, urged by a nudge from Bada, Subin and Hana emerged. They stood in the middle of the cabin floor, holding hands, looking tiny and terrified, their silver skins seeming to dull under the room's lamplight. They were waiting for the shouting, for the calls for capture, for more punishment. Yuna just stared. The raw emotion of the memory was still echoing inside her. She hadn't seen monsters. She had seen heartbreak. She had felt the deepest kind of loneliness. She looked from their faces to Junsu's, which was full of a protective worry she had never seen there before. They crashed. Junsu explained quietly, his eyes pleading with her. They were thrown away by their people, for being different. They think they were bad. They have nowhere to go. Yuna did not reach for her radio. She did not stand up to leave. Instead, she took a deep, steadying breath. She looked at Hana, who had projected the pain. You showed me that? She asked softly. Hana took a tiny step back, but Subin sent a fragile thought concept towards Yuna. It was an apology, mixed with shame. Asterisk, we break things. We are bad at hiding. Asterisk, Yuna shook her head slowly. A single tear escaped her own eye, tracing a path down her cheek. She wiped it away, almost angrily. No, she said, her voice firming. You didn't break anything. She looked at Junsu, her professional mask gone, replaced by a fierce human understanding. Their mom, their collective. It didn't abandon them because they were bad. She swallowed hard. It abandoned them because they loved each other, more than they loved the rules. Her words hung in the air. Junsu felt a wave of relief so strong it made him lightheaded. She understood. Yuna stood up, moving slowly so as not to startle the twins. She approached them, then knelt a few feet away, mirroring Junsu's first gesture in the forest. My name is Yuna, she said gently. I am a friend of Junsu and Bada. She pointed to the dog, who wagged his tail once, cautiously. Subin looked at her, then at Junsu. A question formed. Asterisk, not mom? Asterisk, no, Junsu said, understanding. Not a mom. A friend. Another pack member. Yuna nodded. I help protect this forest. Now I will help protect you. Her mind was already working, shifting from shock to strategy. The sensors. The interference. Others might have seen it. My supervisor might ask questions. She looked at Junsu. They can't stay here forever. Not with people starting to look. I know, Junsu said. But for now, they need to be safe. To heal, Yuna stood. Then we make it safe. I will file a report. I will say the interference was a faulty sensor, maybe a small meteorite that burned up. I will say I checked on you, and all was normal. She gave Junsu a direct look. This is a secret. A big one. You understand? Junsu nodded. Thank you, Yuna. She waved him off, her eyes back on the twins. Hana was looking at her, the fear slowly receding. Yuna offered a small, genuine smile. It's going to be okay, she said, not knowing if it was true, but needing to say it. You found the right place. The wrong people would have hidden you in a lab. You found a man who lives with his dog in the woods. She almost laughed. You got lucky. She moved to the door, pulling her jacket tight. I'll come back in 2 days. With more supplies. Food that might be easier for them. And maybe some clothes? They can't wear those blankets forever. She glanced at their simple tunics. Try to keep them inside. No more psychic fireworks, okay? Her tone was gentle, not an order, but a request. After she left, the cabin felt different. It was no longer just a hiding place. It was a fortress with one more defender. Junsu looked at the twins. Subin's thought came, timid but clear. Asterisk, she saw us. She did not leave. Asterisk, no, Junsu said, stirring the embers in the stove. She did not leave. She is part of the pack now. He pointed to the blankets by the fire. Sleep, you are safe. This time, when they lay down, Bada settled himself firmly between them, his back against Hana, his nose near Subin. The twins' eyes closed, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, the quiet in the room was not filled with the echo of loneliness, but with the simple, steady sound of breathing, of a fire crackling, and of a dog's contented sigh. They were not home, but they were not alone anymore. 3 days passed in a fragile, quiet rhythm. Yuna had returned as promised, bringing soft, simple clothes, sweatpants, and hoodies that were too big but wonderfully warm, and easy foods like rice porridge and boiled eggs. The twins, Subin and Hana, learned to eat with spoons. They learned to mimic the sounds of Junsu and Yuna's names. Their terror had softened into a watchful calm, like deer in a new meadow. Bada was their constant anchor, his solid, warm presence, a language they understood perfectly. But on the 4th night, the calm shattered. It began with Bada. He was sleeping between the twins on their blanket nest when his head suddenly jerked up. A growl, deep and serious, rolled from his chest. He stood, his body rigid, staring at the ceiling as if he could see through the wood and the roof. The twins sat up instantly. A wave of cold dread filled the cabin, coming from them. Subin grabbed Hana's hand. A single shattered thought image hit Junsu, a sleek silver needle against the stars. It was here. Junsu rushed to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. At first, he saw nothing but the familiar night sky. Then a shadow moved, blotting out a cluster of stars. It was a ship, but unlike the organic pod, this one was smooth, geometric, and utterly silent. It descended into the clearing where the pod had crashed, landing without a sound, without a light. A moment later, a voice filled Junsu's head. It was not a sound. It was words inserted directly into his thoughts, cold, clean, and without emotion. It was not speaking to him. It was broadcasting to the twins ** designations. Paired anomaly. Your deviation has been tracked. The collective offers correction. Return for reassimilation. Compliance is logical **. The voice felt like ice water poured into the mind. Junsu saw the twins flinch as if whipped. Hana began to cry silent, silver tears. Subin's thoughts were a storm of despair. Mom is here. She came. But the voice continued. Alternative. You represent a biological irregularity. If you will not return to the whole, you must be sterilized. To protect the pattern. This is the final offer. The only hope. Hope. The word was a curse. Their hope was to be unmade, erased, or killed. Subin looked at Hana, then at Junsu. His small face was a mask of tragic acceptance. He sent a thought, clear and broken. We go. We go so they do not hurt you. We were bad. This is the consequence. Junsu felt a surge of anger so hot it burned away his own fear. This was not justice. This was the cruelty of perfect order. No, he said aloud, his voice hard. He knelt in front of them, blocking their view of the window. Listen to me. That is not hope. He pointed to Bada, who was still growling at the threat he could not see. He pointed to the empty bowl from Hana's dinner. He pointed to the extra sweater Yuna had brought. Hope is not about going back to what hurt you. It is not about giving up. Hope is small. It is stubborn. It is finding a new way forward, even if the way is scary, even if it is just one more day. He cupped his hands as if holding something precious. My hope was to live here, quietly, with my dog. Your hope was to be together. That is a good hope. We fight for that. Subin's eyes were wide. Fight? The concept was alien. They were taught only compliance or flight. We don't fight to destroy, Junsu said, his mind racing. He looked around his cabin, his workshop. He was not a soldier. He was a woodworker. But he knew his tools, his materials. He knew the land. We fight to protect our pack. We make them think this place is wrong, bad for them. An idea, desperate and simple, began to form. The hunter drone was logical. It scanned for their specific life signatures and for threats. It valued efficiency and order. We give it disorder, Junsu muttered. He sprang into action. Stay here. With Bada, he ran to his forge, a small brick setup he used for hardening tools. He built a furious, hot fire, using coal to make it burn intense and dirty with smoke. He opened the flue wide, sending a plume of heat and particulate straight up. Thermal confusion. Next, he went to his old electronics bin. He had a broken radio, an old CB set, a car battery. With frantic speed, he wired the battery to the radio's transmitter circuits, creating a crude, noisy electromagnetic pulse generator. It wouldn't hurt the drone, but it would be like shining a blinding, chaotic light into its sensitive eyes. His final piece was Bada. He put his hands on the dog's head, looking into his loyal eyes. Bada, I need you to be brave. I need you to be a distraction, to be loud, to run where I tell you. Can you do that? Bada licked his hand and gave a short, sharp bark. He understood the tone of mission. Juns, you turned to the twins. You must hide your minds. Can you do that? Make yourselves quiet, like you are sleeping, or like you are not here. Subin nodded slowly. They closed their eyes. A moment later, the constant, soft hum of their presence in Junsu's mind faded to a faint whisper. They were mentally small. Good. Now into the closet. Do not come out, no matter what you hear. They obeyed, scurrying into the dark space. Junsu shut the door. He took a deep breath. He grabbed his makeshift pulse device and a heavy, iron-tipped walking stick. Outside, the night was freezing. The geometric drone sat in the clearing, a silent, menacing sculpture. A ramp had extended, and a single floating orb of light, a scout, was gliding towards the cabin, scanning the ground. Junsu moved to the side of the cabin. He placed the buzzing, sparking electronics box behind a tree stump, aiming it roughly at the drone. He switched it on. A loud, erratic ZZTT crackle pop filled the air, and a visible wave of static washed over the clearing. The scout orb hesitated. Its smooth scan became jerky. Juns, you nodded to Bada. Now, boy. Go, bark, run that way. He pointed to the far side of the clearing, away from the cabin. Bada exploded from the doorway like a brown bullet. He raced across the open ground, barking louder than he had ever barked in his life. A sharp, challenging, furious sound. He ran circles, kicking up leaves and snow. A chaotic, living, moving signal. The drone's main lights snapped on, focusing on Bada. The dog was a biological signature, moving aggressively. It did not match the twins' signature, but it was an anomaly. A problem for its orderly retrieval. Junsu saw his chance. He sprinted, not towards the drone, but to the tree line near the hot forge flue. The plume of heat and smoke was now thick. He used his walking stick to knock over a stack of metal buckets, creating a tremendous, echoing clatter. The drone pivoted. Its sensors now assaulted from three sides. The chaotic noise, the barking animal, and the irregular thermal and sound blast from the forge. Its logical processes were built for silence, stealth, and compliance. This was noise, confusion, and defiance. The cold voice stabbed into Junsu's mind again, but now it seemed frustrated. This environment is illogical, hostile, prepared. Anomaly's signature is obscured by chaotic interference. Asterisk, the scout orb zipped back to the drone. For a long minute, nothing moved. Bada stood his ground, hair raised, still barking. Junsu held his breath, his heart pounding. Then, with a soft, hydraulic hum, the ramp retracted. The drone's lights shifted from white to a dull red. It lifted off the ground, silent as a ghost. It hovered for a second, scanning the chaotic, noisy, hot, barking clearing one last time. The final thought message was not an offer, but a cold statement. Asterisk, the planet is defensive. The retrieval is inefficient. The anomaly will be logged for later assessment. The collective notes the irrationality. Asterisk, without another sound, the ship shot straight up into the sky and vanished among the stars. The silence that followed was immense. Bada's barks trailed off into confused whines. Junsu slid down the tree he was leaning against, his legs weak. He had done it. With a dog, a radio, and a forge, he had turned hope into a weapon of pure, human stubbornness. He stumbled back to the cabin and opened the closet door. Subin and Hana were curled together, their eyes huge in the dark. The message of the drone's departure was in their minds. They understood. Subin's thought came, soft with awe and a new strange feeling. Asterisk, you fought. For us, with noise and heat and a dog. Asterisk, Junsu managed a tired smile. He put a hand on Bada's head. We fought with what we had. We fought for our pack. And we won. For now. For now was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight they were safe. The wrong kind of hope had been answered with a louder, messier, more human kind. The dawn after the drone left was the longest Junsu could remember. No one slept. They sat together by the cooling stove, waiting for the sky to turn from black to gray. Bada was exhausted, his head in Hana's lap, his eyes closed, but his ears still twitching at every sound from the forest. Subin and Hana were quiet, their minds not projecting, just holding on to the feeling of the cold voice, finally being gone. Junsu knew it was not over. The drone had said asterisk, logged for later assessment. They would be back. The cabin was no longer a secret. He made a decision as the first real light touched the windows. We cannot stay here, he said aloud, his voice rough. The twins looked at him, fresh fear in their eyes. He shook his head quickly. Not alone. We go to Yuna. We make a new plan. A better hiding place. He packed a simple bag with food, water, and the twins' few things. They put on the oversized hoodies Yuna had brought, the fabric swallowing their small frames. As they stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the twins paused. They looked at the clearing where their pod had fallen, where the hunter had come. It was a place of both crash and rescue. Subin sent a soft thought of farewell to the broken pod now hidden under brush. The walk to the ranger station was slow. Junsu carried Hana when her steps grew tired, while Subin walked close beside Bada. They moved through the trees, not on the path, staying out of sight. It took hours. Yuna was outside her small station, checking the tires on her truck when she saw them emerge from the tree line. Her eyes went wide. She took in Junsu's grim face, the twins hidden in their hoods, Bada's alert posture. She didn't ask questions. She simply opened the door and waved them all inside. In the warm, cluttered office, with maps on the walls and a radio quietly buzzing. The whole story came out. Junsu told her about the drone, the cold voice, the offers of hope, and their desperate, noisy fight. Yuna listened, her face growing hard. When he finished, she slammed her hand softly on her desk. Sterilized? For being different? That's not hope. That's evil. She looked at the twins with fierce protectiveness. You did the right thing, Junsu. You fought them off with junk. But they will come back with something your junk won't confuse. I know, Junsu said. We need to disappear. Yuna nodded, her mind clicking into a practical planning mode. She stood and pulled down a large topographic map of the region. My aunt. She lives on the south coast in a fishing village called Gog. It is very quiet. She is old, kind, and she asks no questions. She thinks I work with endangered bird conservation. Yuna pointed to a remote cove on the map. She has a small cottage here, away from the main village. It is empty in the winter. You can stay there. I can bring supplies. It is far from here and on the water. Different air, different smells. Maybe harder to find. It was a risk, but it was a plan. A new path. Junsu looked at the twins. What do you think? Subin and Hana looked at the map, then at each other. A silent conversation passed between them. Finally, Subin looked at Yuna, then at Junsu. A new thought concept formed, hesitant but clear. It was not a picture of a place, but a feeling. It was the feeling of trust extended to Yuna. And then, a question aimed at both humans. Asterisk we go, with you? Asterisk Junsu felt a lump in his throat. Yes, he said, we all go. You, me, Bada. Yuna will help us get there and bring us what we need. We stay together. The word together seemed to warm the room. Hana reached down and buried her fingers in Bada's fur. Bada licked her hand. The journey took 2 days in Yuna's old truck, hidden under a tarp and blankets in the back, moving only at night. It was uncomfortable and frightening, but the twins endured it, soothed by the steady presence of their pack. They arrived at the coastal cottage in the pre-dawn darkness. It was small, weathered by salt wind, but it was clean and had a view of the endless, rolling sea. The first morning there, Junsu and the twins stood on the rocky beach. The air tasted of salt, not pine. The sound was of waves, not wind in the trees. It was a new world. The twins stared at the vast, gray water, their faces unreadable. Yuna had to return to her station to keep up appearances, but she promised to return in a week with more supplies. After she drove away, a silence fell, filled only by the crashing surf. Junsu wondered if the twins were afraid of this new unknown. He built a small fire from driftwood. They sat around it. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Subin pointed. At the fire, then at the sea, then at the cottage, and at Junsu and Bada. A complex thought began to form, not of fear, but of mapping, asterisk forest, cabin, bad voice, fight, truck, long dark, now, water, new house, same pack, asterisk. He looked at Junsu, his large dark eyes reflecting the flames. Asterisk, this is not our home, but you are our home. Asterisk, the simplicity and depth of it took Junsu's breath away. Hana leaned against Bada, who was sniffing a curious piece of seaweed. She sent her own thought, softer, wrapped in a feeling of quiet wonder. She was looking at the horizon where the sea met the sky. Asterisk, Mom's home is up. Our home is here. Asterisk, she placed her small silver hand over her own heart, then pointed to Junsu, to Bada, and back to Subin. They were not just hiding. They were building. Their home was not a star or a planet. It was the bond between them. It was a choice made every day. Weeks turned into a month. The twins grew stronger. They learned more words. They helped Junsu mend fishing nets his new neighbor had given him. They laughed, a sound like soft wind chimes, when Bada chased the waves and ran back barking at the foam. Yuna visited often, her endangered birds requiring more and more care. She brought books, more clothes that fit better, and news from the outside world that felt farther and farther away. One evening, they all sat on the cottage's small porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors of orange and purple. The twins sat on either side of Bada, their hands resting on his back. They had been quiet, watching the first stars appear. Subin looked up at the emerging pinpricks of light. He did not feel fear. He felt a distant sadness, like remembering a cold dream. He looked at Junsu. A long time ago, Mom was there, he thought, pointing to the sky. Asterisk, we look for hope there. We found only rules. Asterisk, he then looked around at the darkening beach, the warm light from the cottage window, at Yuna and Junsu talking. Softly, at Hana braiding a piece of grass into Bada's collar. Asterisk, now we look here. We found. Pack, family, found. Asterisk, the words were simple, but they held the weight of a universe. They were not a people of a planet anymore. They were something new. They were a family, forged not by genetics or logic, but by kindness offered in a dark forest and by the loyalty of a dog. Junsu put a hand on Subin's small shoulder. He didn't need to send a thought back. The understanding was complete. The future was uncertain. The stars might still hold danger. But here, on this rocky beach, with the sound of the sea and the warmth of a fire, they had all the hope they would ever need. It was messy and illogical, and built on love. And it was enough.